Wednesday Addams had never trusted coincidence, not because she thought the universe was orderly, but because chaos still obeyed rules if one observed it long enough. Violence repeated itself. Fear left residue. Towns forgot on schedules. When people claimed something had happened out of nowhere, it usually meant they had stopped paying attention right before the pattern completed itself. That was why she was awake at 3:17 in the morning, sitting straight-backed at her desk in Ophelia Hall, fully dressed in black as if sleep itself were an inconvenience rather than a necessity. The rest of Nevermore Academy lay submerged in its usual nocturnal quiet, the kind thick with secrets and breathing walls. But Wednesday remained alert, eyes sharp, mind methodically stripping meaning from data. Thing sat beside her typewriter, fingers folded with exaggerated patience, occasionally twitching when her thoughts took a turn he found especially promising. Outside the tall windows, the Vermont woods pressed close, branches swaying in a wind that felt less like weather and more like deliberation. Wednesday had noticed, over the last week, that the forest had begun to sound different at night, as if it were listening instead of merely existing. She pressed a key on the typewriter, the sound cracking through the silence like a bone snapping cleanly. She reread the paragraph she had just written, her dark eyes moving with surgical precision across the page, lingering on each word long enough to test its honesty. 3 disappearances, no signs of struggle, no bodies, no demands, all preceded by escalating reports of fear-based hallucinations and behavioral withdrawal. All victims last seen calm. Calm was the anomaly. Panic left fingerprints. Calm was consent. Wednesday underlined the word voluntary twice, then once more for emphasis, the ink biting into the paper. Thing lifted 2 fingers in a questioning gesture. Yes, Wednesday said without looking at him, already rising from her chair and crossing the room. I'm certain. Her evidence wall covered nearly the entire far side of the dorm room, a collage of photographs, newspaper clippings, police reports, hand-drawn maps, and handwritten notes pinned in neat, aggressive symmetry. Faces stared back from the images. A 14-year-old boy from Jericho with nervous eyes. A 23-year-old waitress whose smile never reached her gaze. A college freshman whose family described her as easily startled, and too imaginative for her own good. Different ages, different towns, different lives, the same ending. Each had been last observed smiling. Wednesday traced a gloved finger along the dates, her mind already assembling the shape they suggested. The intervals were not perfect, not mathematical enough to satisfy her, but they were close enough to imply intention rather than accident. Every 27 years, give or take a margin of human error, something old was active again. Nevermore Academy was no stranger to predators, but those creatures were usually born of biology, magic, or neglect. This felt older than taxonomy. It felt like a habit. Wednesday added a new image to the board, pinning it carefully in place. The photograph was grainy, pulled from a traffic camera at the edge of Jericho, the rain blurring the frame into streaks of gray and white. Near the bottom corner, distorted by motion, floated a shape so vividly colored it felt obscene against the muted background. A red balloon. Balloons imply celebration, Wednesday murmured, her voice steady. Celebration implies children. Children imply vulnerability. Thing's fingers curled slightly. Yes, she continued, predators understand semiotics. She packed her bag with the efficiency of someone who never expected to return unchanged. A notebook, a switchblade, grave dirt collected from a 19th century cemetery with questionable zoning permits. A psychology textbook with entire chapters annotated in sharp, unforgiving script. After a brief pause, she added a small silver mirror, its surface dulled with age. Thing leapt onto her shoulder as she slipped out into the hallway. I'm not asking permission, Wednesday said. I'm informing you. Jericho at night abandoned its pretense of quaintness. Without daylight to flatter it, the town's architecture sagged into honesty, revealing hairline cracks in shadows that lingered too long. Streetlights hummed unevenly. Windows reflected nothing. The air itself felt like it had been waiting. Wednesday walked openly, boots striking the pavement with deliberate rhythm, her presence announced rather than concealed. Fear respected confidence. So did monsters. She stopped at the edge of Main Street, where a storm drain yawned open, its metal grate rusted and damp, the darkness beneath thick enough to feel tactile. The smell reached her before the sound. It was not sewage or rot, but something older and less definable, like standing water that had forgotten how to move, layered with iron and a sweetness that did not belong underground. The kind of smell that triggered memories rather than instincts. Wednesday crouched, peering into the drain. "Hello," she said calmly. "You're careless." For several seconds, nothing answered her. Then a sound drifted upward, light and measured, each syllable placed with intention. Laughter. Not hysterical, not joyful. A sound rehearsed over centuries, refined through trial and error. "Well, hello there," a voice crooned from below. "Are not you a long way from home, little girl?" Two eyes appeared first, hovering just beyond the reach of the streetlight. Yellow, reflective, unblinking. Then the rest of the face assembled itself as if the darkness were reluctantly cooperating. Chalk-white skin stretched unnaturally tight, red lips carved into an exaggerated smile, orange hair floating as though submerged. A clown. Wednesday felt a brief, sharp pang of disappointment. "I expected something more original," she said. The smile twitched, a minute malfunction in the performance. "Most children are happy to see me," the clown replied, voice thick with practiced warmth. "I make people laugh." "I do not find humor in repetition," Wednesday said. "It suggests intellectual stagnation." The clown leaned closer, its face filling the drain's opening, eyes glittering with something that had never been human. "I can smell you," it whispered. "You're full of such interesting things. Sadness, curiosity, death that has not happened yet." "Flattery is inefficient," Wednesday replied, "and I'm not climbing into a sewer." The thing's laughter rippled through the pipes, echoing in places Wednesday suspected did not physically exist. "I do not need you to climb," it said softly. "Everyone floats in the end." Wednesday smiled then, small and deliberate, the kind of smile that preceded dissections. "That presumes a lack of gravity," she said. "I am very aware of my weight." Rain began to fall, thin needles threading the air between them, darkening the pavement and streaking the clown's painted face without disturbing it. "What are you?" the clown asked, curiosity bleeding through its voice despite itself. Wednesday leaned closer, her gaze unwavering. "I am someone who studies fear instead of running from it," she said, "and you are trespassing." For the first time, the thing hesitated. It was a pause so slight most humans would have missed it, but Wednesday had built her life on noticing what others ignored. Recognition flickered behind the eyes. "You're not afraid," it said, the words almost reverent. "No. That's unfortunate." "Adapt," Wednesday suggested. The smile widened beyond the limits of bone and muscle, stretching into something obscene. "We'll see," it whispered. "Everyone is afraid of something." Then it withdrew, melting backward into the darkness, its laughter lingering too long, echoing through the pipes like a pulse. Wednesday remained where she was, rain soaking her hair, the night pressing in. Thing tapped her shoulder urgently. "Yes," Wednesday said. "I saw it too." She pulled the silver mirror from her bag and angled it toward the drain. For a fraction of a second, the reflection fractured. No clown. Something vast and pale and impossibly old. A suggestion of limbs and hunger that did not belong to any geometry meant for human comprehension. Then the image snapped back to normal. Wednesday closed the mirror and returned it to her bag. Pennywise, she said quietly, committing the name to memory. An ancient predator, a creature that fed on fear and survived on forgetfulness. She turned back toward Nevermore, her steps unhurried, her expression thoughtful. This, she decided, will be instructive. By morning, Nevermore Academy had begun to feel the pressure. It was subtle at first, the way most meaningful things were. Students woke from dreams they could not articulate, images dissolving the moment language approached them. Several missed breakfast without realizing why. One Gorgon reported that her snakes refused to open their eyes. A siren lost her voice mid-scale and spent the rest of the morning staring at her reflection as if it had offended her personally. Wednesday noticed all of it. She noticed the way the halls felt narrower, as though the architecture were leaning inward. She noticed the sudden increase in nervous laughter, brittle and misplaced. She noticed that Enid, normally an explosion of color and sound, hesitated before leaving their room, her hand hovering over the doorknob as if she expected it to bite. "You okay?" Enid asked, forcing brightness into her tone. "No," Wednesday replied, "but I rarely am." "That's not what I meant." "I know." Enid shifted her weight, tail flicking anxiously behind her. "I had this dream. Not scary exactly, just wrong, like I was being watched. But whoever it was did not care about me, like I was furniture." Wednesday paused. "Did it laugh?" she asked. Enid blinked. "Yeah, how did you? Did it sound rehearsed?" Enid swallowed. "Wednesday?" "Thank you," Wednesday said. "That's all." She left before Enid could ask the question that was already forming, because questions created vulnerability, and vulnerability attracted attention, and something was already paying attention. Wednesday spent the day in the archives beneath Nevermore, a place older than the school itself, carved from stone that remembered different names. Dust hung thick in the air, heavy with the scent of paper, ink, and secrets that had waited centuries to be useful again. Thing worked efficiently, pulling volumes from shelves too high or too fragile for her to reach without assistance. The creature she had encountered the night before had not lied. That alone made it dangerous. Pennywise was a name, not a true one, but a handle, something humans could grasp without losing themselves. Wednesday found references scattered across continents and centuries, always distorted, always dismissed as folklore or mass hysteria. Children vanished, towns forgot, cycles repeated. Fear was the common denominator, but not in the way most people assumed. Pennywise did not merely consume fear, it curated it, cultivated it, allowed it to mature until it was complex, layered, flavored with anticipation and despair, like aging meat. "What you are," Wednesday murmured to the pages, "is an apex parasite." She read until her eyes burned, until the words began to bleed into one another, until the thing she was hunting began to feel less like an external threat and more like a gravitational anomaly bending everything toward it. Then she found the anomaly, a journal, bound in cracked leather, its pages warped as if they had once been wet and then dried badly. The author was anonymous, but the handwriting was precise, obsessive, familiar in a way that made Wednesday's pulse slow. The journal did not describe fear, it described immunity. The writer claimed that Pennywise could not feed on everyone, that certain minds disrupted its process, not because they were fearless, but because their fear did not behave correctly. It did not bloom or escalate or seek relief. It remained static, observational, almost curious. People like that were not meals. They were irritants or tools. Wednesday closed the journal slowly. For the first time since arriving at Nevermore, She felt something like unease, not fear, but the intellectual equivalent, the awareness that a hypothesis was incomplete. She had assumed Pennywise would hunt her. The journal suggested something worse. It might recruit her. That night, the school locked down. No official announcement was made, but the gates sealed themselves, and the teachers moved through the halls with a tension they did not bother disguising. Miss Thornhill was absent. Principal Weems watched Wednesday for too long during dinner, her gaze sharp with unspoken calculations. Wednesday welcomed the scrutiny. It meant the game was accelerating. She did not wait for Pennywise to come to her. She went to it. The forest accepted her without protest, branches parting just enough to allow passage. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became, until even her footsteps seemed intrusive. Eventually, she reached a clearing she had never seen before, though she suspected it had always been there. A circus tent stood at its center. Red and white stripes faded with age. Canvas stitched and restitched until it barely remembered its original shape. No lights, no music, just the smell of iron and sugar and wet earth. "You're early," Pennywise said pleasantly. It emerged from the tent without theatrics this time. No sudden movements, no exaggerated gestures. It wore a simpler form, almost human, its eyes less reflective, its smile less grotesque, almost honest. "You're adapting," Wednesday observed. "You're interesting," it replied. "I do not get many of those anymore." "Because you eat them." "Because they break," Pennywise corrected. "You would not." "That remains to be seen." It circled her slowly, footsteps soundless against the grass. "You've been reading about me." "Yes." "And?" "And you're inefficient." Pennywise laughed, genuinely this time. "Careful, that sounds like admiration." "It sounds like critique." The clown stopped in front of her. "You do not fear me." "No." "You do not deny me." "No." "You do not want to destroy me." "No." Wednesday met its gaze. "You're a phenomenon. Destroying you would be like killing gravity. Impressive, but impractical." The thing studied her in silence, ancient attention pressing against her mind like a weight. "You know," it said slowly, "I was here before your school, before this forest, before your species learned how to scream properly." "And yet," Wednesday replied, "you still rely on children." "Because children imagine better. Because adults forget how." Pennywise smiled. "Exactly." The air shifted. The clearing felt suddenly larger, deeper, as if the world were unfolding layers it normally kept hidden. "You do not belong in this part of the story," Pennywise said. "But stories change." It extended a hand. "I do not want to eat you," it continued. "I want to learn you." Wednesday did not take the hand. "You misunderstand," she said. "I did not come here to negotiate." "Oh?" "I came to verify." Pennywise tilted its head. "Verify what?" "That you exist outside linear fear." "And?" "And that means you can be studied." The thing laughed again, sharp and delighted. "Oh, Wednesday Addams, you do not study something like me." "Of course I do," she replied. "I already am." The ground beneath them shifted. Reality peeled back like wet paper. And for the first time, Pennywise stopped smiling. Because Wednesday was no longer standing in the clearing, she was standing somewhere else. Somewhere older. A place without shape or direction, where concepts floated unfinished and hunger had weight. Pennywise's true form loomed around her, vast and incomprehensible, its presence pressing against her mind with the expectation of collapse. Humans screamed here, humans begged, humans dissolved. Wednesday stood still. She felt the pressure. She acknowledged it. She cataloged it. Her fear did not spike. It did not crescendo. It remained flat, observational. Pennywise recoiled. "What are you?" it demanded, the voice no longer playful. Wednesday considered the question, then she smiled. "I'm what happens when fear does not perform." The thing thrashed, the space around them warping violently as it tried to provoke a response. Images of death, isolation, loss, all carefully tailored, all exquisitely rendered. Wednesday watched them like slides under a microscope. "Interesting," she murmured. "You're not showing me my worst fear." Pennywise hesitated. "You're showing me yours." The realization hit it like a wound. Because Wednesday was not afraid of being alone. She was afraid of being bored. And Pennywise, for all its age and power, was predictable. That was when she felt it. Not fear, recognition. Something in her responded to the place, to the scale, to the cold vastness of it. A sense of familiarity she could not trace to memory or biology. The journal had been right. She was not prey, she was adjacent. Pennywise drew back, suddenly wary. "You're not human," it said. Wednesday looked at her hands, steady and pale against the impossible dark. "I never claimed to be," she replied. The space shuddered, and then, without warning, Pennywise laughed. Not in mockery, in relief. "Oh," it said softly. "Oh, this changes things." The world snapped back. Wednesday found herself once again in the clearing, the forest silent, the tent gone as if it had never existed. Pennywise stood before her, diminished, contained, its smile carefully neutral. "You do not want to kill me," it said. "No." "You do not want to stop me." "No." "You want to understand me." "Yes." "And in doing so," Pennywise continued, eyes bright with something dangerously close to admiration, "you'll make me better." Wednesday tilted her head. "That," she said, "was not my intention." Pennywise leaned closer, lowering its voice. "Intentions are irrelevant. Outcomes matter." It stepped back, already fading. "We'll meet again," it promised. "You're part of the cycle now." "No," Wednesday corrected calmly. "I'm the deviation." Pennywise's laughter echoed through the trees as it vanished. Wednesday stood alone, the night closing around her. She did not notice the thin red line on her palm until later, when she returned to Nevermore and washed her hands. She did not remember cutting herself. The blood spiraled briefly in the sink before disappearing down the drain. Somewhere far beneath the school, something laughed. And something else, something ancient and newly awake, smiled in exactly the same way. Morning did not arrive so much as assemble itself reluctantly around Nevermore Academy. The sky lightened in thin, anemic layers, as though daylight were being rationed. Fog clung to the grounds longer than it should have, pooling in hollows, curling around statues, lingering at the base of the black iron gates like an animal unsure whether it was allowed to enter. The bells rang on time, but the sound felt delayed, as if it had to travel through something viscous before reaching the ears of those meant to hear it. Wednesday noticed all of this. She also noticed that she did not feel tired. She should have. Her body registered the lack of sleep in an abstract way, like a footnote, but her mind was sharp, humming with a low, steady alertness that felt less like adrenaline and more like alignment. Something had clicked into place during the night, not comfortably, but precisely, the way bones did when reset correctly. She dressed without looking at her reflection. The mirror on the wardrobe rippled faintly anyway. Classes proceeded as scheduled, which meant no one believed they mattered anymore. Professor Thornhill's absence had been explained away as personal leave, a phrase so vague it functioned as a warning. Several students flinched when lockers slammed. A vampire in Wednesday's literature seminar fainted halfway through a discussion of Gothic inevitability. When he came to, he claimed he'd smelled popcorn and blood at the same time and could not explain why that had terrified him. Wednesday wrote it down. By midday, rumors had metastasized. Whispers of a visitor, of something that did not belong to any known outcast taxonomy, of nightmares that bled into waking life and refused to obey the usual rules. Enid found Wednesday in the quad, sitting beneath a dead tree, sketching concentric shapes in her notebook that were not quite circles. "You're scaring people," Enid said, dropping down beside her. "And not in your normal, healthy way." "Define healthy." Enid hesitated. "You did not sleep." "I did," Wednesday replied, "just not traditionally." "That's not reassuring." "It was not meant to be." Enid hugged her knees to her chest. "I keep thinking I hear laughing." "Like," she made a small, helpless gesture, "like something's rehearsing." Wednesday closed her notebook. "Fear is a language," she said. "You're hearing someone practice." Enid's ears flattened. "And you?" "I'm fluent." That was when the ground shuddered. Not violently, not enough to trigger alarms, just a subtle displacement, like the world had cleared its throat. Every raven on campus took flight at once. Wednesday stood. "It started," she said. "What has?" "The mistake." The first body was found in the greenhouse, not torn apart, not mutilated, just arranged. A junior student lay on a bed of soil, hands folded neatly over his chest, his face frozen in an expression of mild surprise. His eyes were open, his mouth curved upward in the faintest approximation of a smile. No blood, no visible trauma. The teachers sealed the area within minutes, but it did not matter. The damage was not physical. It was atmospheric. Fear spread through Nevermore like a draft through old stone, finding every crack, every vulnerability. Wednesday stood at the edge of the cordon, watching the way people reacted. Most recoiled. Some cried. A few stared too long. Those were the ones Pennywise favored. Thing tugged insistently at her sleeve. "Yes," Wednesday murmured. "I see it." Something was wrong with the corpse. Not that it was dead, that it was empty. She slipped away before anyone could stop her. The archives welcomed her like a wound reopening. The journal was where she'd left it, but the pages had changed. New writing crawled across the margins, ink dark and wet, as if the book itself had bled. Not handwriting, impressions. Thoughts pressed hard enough into reality to leave grooves. "You are not an accident." Wednesday exhaled slowly. She flipped the page. "You are not a fluke." Another. "You are not alone." Her fingers stilled. That was incorrect. She closed the book and pressed her palm flat against the cover. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the shelves groaned, the air thickened, and something answered. Not Pennywise, something deeper, older. The space around Wednesday folded inward, not violently, but with the patience of a thing that had done this before and would do it again long after she was gone. Except she was not gone. She was still there, and that mattered. The archive peeled away, revealing a vast, dim expanse that felt less like a place and more like a condition. Ideas floated unfinished. Shapes suggested themselves and then abandoned the effort. Hunger existed as a principle rather than a sensation. This was not Pennywise's lair. This was its context. Wednesday stood at the center of it, her heartbeat steady, her mind cataloging the experience even as it stretched to accommodate it. "So," she said aloud, "this is where you keep the things you do not want to look at." The response was not laughter. No, it was a tension. It pressed against her from all directions. Not hostile, Not curious, but evaluative. She felt herself being measured, compared, matched. "You feed," Wednesday said, voice carrying farther than it should have. "But you also persist. You repeat. You refine. That suggests purpose beyond consumption." The space shifted. A pressure formed, coalescing into something like presence without form. "We endure." "Yes," Wednesday agreed. "But why?" The answer came not as words, but as a realization that slotted into her mind with terrifying ease. Because fear was not the goal. Fear was the interface. Pennywise was not the predator at the top of the hierarchy. It was the mouth. Wednesday's lips parted slightly. "You do not just eat fear," she said slowly. "You use it to map, to test, to find minds that can survive contact. Some do. Most break. Most are unnecessary." Wednesday smiled faintly. "And the ones who are not?" The space around her tightened, not threatening, but intimate. They changed the shape of things. Something inside her resonated. Not fear, not excitement, recognition. She remembered the mirror, the reflection that had not been Pennywise, the sense of familiarity that had followed. "You did not create me," she said, "but you've been watching for me." "Yes." "Why?" The pause this time was longer. "Because the cycle is failing." Wednesday felt it then, a fracture running through the vastness, hairline but growing. Pennywise was becoming inefficient. Humans were forgetting faster. Fear was blunting, diluting, losing its potency, entropy, even here. "You need an update," Wednesday said. "We need an anchor." Her gaze hardened. "You want to install me?" "You already are." The truth landed like a dropped scalpel. That was the twist Pennywise had not mentioned. It was not recruiting her. It was preparing her. The body in the greenhouse had not been a feeding. It had been a test. And the result had been inconclusive. Wednesday felt something brush the edge of her consciousness. Not invading, not coercing, just aligning. A future branching. A version of herself standing very still while the world learned new ways to be afraid. "No," she said quietly. "You misunderstand." "I rarely do." "This is not a request." The pressure increased. Reality bent. And for the first time since this began, Wednesday felt something approach fear. Not sharp, not consuming, but distant and cold. The fear of irrelevance, of being used. She leaned into it, observed it, disassembled it. Then she laughed. A single, soft sound that echoed too loudly. "You made one error," she said. "You assumed I wanted to remain myself." The presence faltered. "I am not an anchor," Wednesday continued. "I am a variable." She reached into her pocket and withdrew the switchblade. Metal clicked open. The sound carried significance far beyond its volume. "You need a mind that can survive you," she said. "But what you actually need is one that can end you." She pressed the blade into her palm. Blood welled, dark and precise. The space recoiled. "You've been feeding on fear for millennia," Wednesday said. "Let's see how you handle intent." She carved a symbol into her skin. Not one from any book, not one meant for summoning, one meant for severing. Reality screamed. The archives slammed back into place. Wednesday collapsed to her knees, breath sharp, blood dripping onto ancient stone. The journal lay open before her, its pages now blank. Far below Nevermore, something vast convulsed. Pennywise screamed, not in pain, in terror. And in the silence that followed, Wednesday realized something far worse. The laughter had stopped, which meant whatever she had wounded was no longer playing. And something else, something that had never needed fear at all, was beginning to wake. The silence lasted exactly 7 seconds. Wednesday counted them without moving, kneeling on the archive floor while blood slid from her palm and soaked into stone that had been thirsty long before she arrived. 7 seconds was long enough for the world to decide whether it intended to continue. On the 8th, Nevermore screamed. Not audibly at first. The sound came later. What arrived first was pressure, walls flexing inward, shelves rattling as if shaken by an impatient hand, sigils carved into the stone flaring and then guttering out like candles in a vacuum. The academy had been built as a refuge, but refuges assumed an outside. Whatever was happening no longer respected that distinction. Wednesday stood. Her hand stopped bleeding the moment she closed her fingers. The symbol she had carved into her palm did not vanish. It sank, settling beneath the skin like a bruise that remembered geometry. "Not ideal," she said. Above her, something boomed, distant, wet, furious. Not Pennywise's laughter. This was deeper, structural, as if a foundation had shifted and discovered it no longer supported what rested on it. Wednesday ascended the stairs 2 at a time. The halls were chaos. Students ran without direction, some crying, some laughing hysterically, some simply staring as doors bent inward and shadows detached themselves from their owners. A werewolf slammed into a wall and did not stand back up. A siren screamed, the sound shattering glass and triggering alarms that immediately died. Wednesday moved through it untouched. Fear rippled around her, but it did not cling. It parted, instinctively, like a crowd sensing a blade. Enid found her near the grand staircase, eyes wild, fur standing on end. "Wednesday!" She grabbed her sleeve. "Something's wrong. Like, really wrong. I cannot," her voice broke. "I cannot feel the moon." That stopped Wednesday. She turned fully toward Enid, studying her face with a focus sharp enough to hurt. "When did it start?" she asked. "Just now." Everything went quiet, inside. Wednesday nodded once. "That's consistent." "With what?" Enid demanded. "With collapse." Another shudder rolled through the building. Stone cracked. A portrait screamed and tore itself free from its frame. Enid stared at her. "Did you do this?" "Yes." The honesty landed harder than any lie. Enid's grip loosened. "Why?" Wednesday considered the question, then answered truthfully. "Because they wanted to use me," she said, "and I objected." Something howled beneath them, the sound vibrating through bone and memory alike. A presence swept across the grounds, not hunting, not feeding, searching. Pennywise was gone, not dead, displaced. The mouth had been torn from the system, and the system was compensating. Wednesday felt it now, clearly, the thing she had cut into motion. Not an entity in the human sense, not even a creature, a function. Fear had been the interface because fear was abundant and self-sustaining. Pennywise had been a node, a specialized organ. Remove it, and the structure did not die. It adapted. "What's happening?" Enid whispered. "They're upgrading," Wednesday said. A shadow detached itself from the far wall and moved independently, stretching upward until it resolved into a shape that approximated a person, but lacked detail, as though the idea of humanity had been remembered imperfectly. It turned toward Wednesday and stopped. The shadow hesitated, then bowed. Enid made a strangled sound. Why is it bowing to you?" Wednesday felt the answer settle into her bones. Because the system had found a new anchor. Not installed. Recognized. The thing spoke without a mouth, its voice arriving directly, bypassing air and ear alike. "You have altered the sequence." "Yes," Wednesday said. "You have damaged a primary vector." "Yes." "You have exposed yourself." She tilted her head. That was unavoidable. The present studied her, its form sharpening slightly, becoming less uncertain. Fear is no longer sufficient. That was always going to happen, Wednesday replied. Your error was assuming you could continue unchanged. The shadow leaned closer. The air grew painfully cold. Then what replaces it? Wednesday smiled. Clarity. The word hit like a detonation. Across the grounds, students screamed as illusions peeled away. What they had feared dissolved, replaced not by comfort, but by understanding. Monsters lost their mystique. Nightmares lost their symbolism. The unknown became known, and the known became unbearable. Fear collapsed. Panic surged, but panic did not feed the system. It destabilized it. The shadow recoiled, its form unraveling. This is not sustainable, it warned. No, Wednesday agreed. It's terminal. The presence lashed out, not at her, but at the world, trying to reassert narrative, meaning, dread. But the feedback loop was broken. Without fear's cooperation, the structure tore itself apart. The ground split. Below Nevermore, something vast convulsed. Not screaming this time, but unraveling, its functions collapsing into noise. Enid clutched her head. Wednesday, make it stop. Wednesday looked at her friend, really looked. This was the cost, not fear, understanding. She reached out and took Enid's hand. I cannot stop it, she said gently, but I can finish it. She turned back to the dissolving presence. You wanted an anchor, Wednesday said. Here it is. She pressed her bleeding palm to the shadow. The symbol flared, and Wednesday Addams disappeared. The collapse was instantaneous. Nevermore lurched, then stilled. The shadows snapped back into place. The cracks sealed. The screaming stopped. Fear returned, but thinner, weaker, like an echo trying to remember its source. Students lay scattered, dazed but alive. Teachers emerged slowly, eyes hollow, sensing something had ended without knowing what. Enid knelt on the floor where Wednesday had been. There was no scorch mark, no body, only a faint imprint on the stone, shaped like a hand. And the smell, cold air after a storm, mixed with iron. Weeks later, life resumed. It always did. The disappearances stopped. Pennywise did not return. Nightmares faded into ordinary bad dreams. The world adjusted, clumsily but insistently, to a reality with less fear in it. But something else changed. Children stopped seeing monsters in the dark. They started seeing systems, patterns, truths adults did not want to explain. Some called it maturity, others called it a crisis. Enid sometimes swore she felt eyes watching her, not hungrily, not playfully, but attentively, as if something vast were learning restraint. Somewhere that was not a place, Wednesday Addams opened her eyes. There was no body to open them with, but the gesture mattered. She existed now as alignment rather than flesh, thought rather than form, embedded deep in the structure she had broken and rebuilt in the same motion. She had not become the system, she had caged it. Fear still existed, but now it had to answer to something colder, something that did not feed, something that watched and waited. Wednesday smiled, alone in the dark that was no longer allowed to pretend it was infinite. Order, she whispered, and the universe, for the first time, obeyed.